You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical.
Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I have a guest here with me today, a topic that I find very interesting. So we are going to cover everything that she does, including her newest book. So first, I'm going to turn it over to her so she can introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Hi, so I'm Halo Quin. I am a pagan author, a storyteller, and a witch, of course. This is why I'm here. Where can you find me? You can come and find me on my website. So that's www. Of course, haloquin.net. That's the net that I capture everything under. And that's HALOQUIN. I'm sure it'll be in the notes. What else? So some interesting possibly things about me. I live on the wild, wet, windy west coast of Wales in the UK. So you might hear from my accent that I'm British. And I love it here. The ocean is just the other side of the wall behind me. So that's very exciting. I am a doctor of philosophy, specifically in the phenomenology of storytelling. And I've been obsessed with fairies for longer than I can remember, and following magic for as long as I've been chasing fairies, and officially discovered witchcraft when I was about 11. So that was the point at which I realized that other adults really believed that magic was real and that it was okay to hold on to that knowing I had as a small child.
So fairies were your first introduction.
Oh yes, absolutely, and have been a lifelong companion.
I think that other followers of Pagan Portal books might be familiar with some of your fairy work. I know I was.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, this is the thing, is that when we're young, it can be hard to find, particularly in the culture that I grew up in, it can be really hard to find actual mentions of genuine magic and of pagan paths and things. And I didn't really notice that my mum had tarot cards and that teaching us to talk to trees was not normal. I kind of thought of myself as being Christian and understood that there was an expectation that magic wasn't really real, but I was always looking for it. And I remember when I was, 6 or 7, trying to find the magic words to get the exact right phrasing for a prayer to make things come true. And so I was basically trying to work out spellcraft, but within that framework. But it was the fair folk. It was those spirits that I could feel particularly when I went outside or was sort of standing next to a tree or crawling through the hedgerows, because I'm sure there's something in here. There's someone here, and I want to find them. So, and the word fairy was the closest word that I could find for what I was feeling and what I was hearing, just on the edge of my hearing, those spirits. So yeah, they've always been very present for me, and I was lucky enough not to lose that connection as I got older, just because of when I found my way into more official, overt pagan spaces.
Do you find, now that you've been practicing and publishing books and connecting with people more online, do you find that fairy magic is bigger or like more information where you are than opposed to people that are in the States like me? Because I just always feel like it has such a like sort of Celtic background with so much fairy magic. But I don't find as much information in the US unless I'm like really digging for it.
So there's this really interesting thing, right? Fairy is effectively, it's the English word. It's the English word that's been exported around the world, like much of our language has, and brought into other spaces. And so it carries kind of Celtic, to use the term loosely, connotations, because that's where people associate the word. So when you're in the States and you're in the desert in Arizona and you're reading up on fairies and you're reading these stories that are talking about the Northern European fair folk in the forests, like that's a very different landscape, and the spirits are going to have a different vibe to them. But that term fairy, well, in English, we're using it to apply to like a category of spirits. They're not specific species, like humans are a species and cats are a species or whatever. Like, they're not a specific species. It's like a category of spirits. And that category is really, really smushy. It's broad and complex and encompasses a lot of things. So when people are in other places, I mean, for starters, just here, if you root back through the lore, the fairy lore that is here, and follow it back through the kind of the Celtic stuff that is very popular at the moment and has been popular for a while, you start to uncover the connections within the heathen spaces. So the old English word for the spirits that we now use the term fairy for was elf, right? So we used to call them elves. They were the magical beings that are like us, but not quite like us, that live alongside us, that are powerful and untamed and therefore scary when we don't have, so we need to sort of either avoid them or barter with them or sort of like make sure that we're going to have a good relationship with them because they're part of that world that we live alongside, they live alongside us in the world of spirit, of magic, and of nature. So we live in all of those parts, right? And so when you go to somewhere else, say you're in the desert, if you're looking for fairies, you're looking for spirits that fit that kind of space, that kind of category. And there's an amazing book called Fairies and Their History, or Fairy Stories and Their History. Fairies and Fairy Stories, A History. Diane Purkis is the author, and she traces back these beings right the way into the wilds of the wind spirits in the desert. There's a family in the Arabic and Middle Eastern deserts. So there's this family of spirits of evolution that have these connections. So where you are, the stories that you're looking for when you're looking for the fair folk of your land, your neighbors, you're going to be looking for spirits that actually have a different name locally and that have slightly different qualities in terms of how they express that, because they're desert neighbors, not deep green forest neighbors. And even if you've got the forest where you live, like the forests in America, in different parts of America, very different to the forests here. In like mid Wales, we actually have temperate rainforests. One of my friends has told me about this, and I'm like, we have rainforest in Wales, but it's temperate rainforest. So that's a particular type of forest. And the spirits there have that kind of nature, that kind of culture. Just the same as if you go from state to state in America or even county to county in Britain, which is on a much smaller scale, you'll find variations in the culture and the expression and the overall look and feel and the language of the people. All of our accents change, like you travel 50 miles here and you've got an entirely different accent and slightly different cultural expectations. That's the same with the fair folk, with our neighbours.
I really love how you talk about it in terms of language and history and in relation to these different places and the different ways that you can find the fair folk. And I think that is something that really comes across in your newest book that's out. I just love how you weave the language and the art of word through all of your works. I think that's so fascinating. And I think a lot of my listeners also love the power of word. So I'd love to jump into what your newest book is that just came out. So congratulations on another new book.
Thank you. So my newest book is Storytelling for Magic, and the subtitle is Bardic Skills and Ritual Craft for Witches and Pagans. And what I wanted to get across with that is that within the art of using your voice and of performing and of creativity and being inspired. So I focus on the voice because that's where I'm at, and I focus on language and the words because that's my passion. But that actually, the bardic arena encompasses quite a lot of creative spaces. It's that space of expression and being inspired and bringing that through. And we weave that through in our ritual craft, our spell craft, whether that's in a big group or just 2 or 3 of us, or we're on our own. Because in those spaces, I always come back to that thing that storytelling, whatever medium you're using, is about communication. It's about communicating with other people and with yourself. So when you're storytelling, you may well be creating, you may well actually be receiving that story, receiving that information, as well as speaking it aloud, writing it down, painting it. So it's all about that communication. And communication is always with someone, it's between people, it's in relationship. And people includes the non-human spirits of the world as well. People includes the trees, the rocks, the land, the sands of the desert, the waves on the sea. It includes the fair folk and the gods. And it includes your own listening heart. So to me, the storytelling and all of the things bound up in that is all about when you're using your voice, you're creating vibrations. When you're writing, you're creating patterns, you're shifting the energy of the world. But it's all in that moment of relationship, expression, sharing, receiving, giving.
I really appreciate the idea of just words themselves being magic. I know a lot of beginners in the space can get overwhelmed with spell and ritual books that have like 50 different correspondences for one spell and feeling the need to like gather all of these ingredients when really you could just use words for everything.
Oh, yes. There's something, I can't remember where the quote was from, but it was something in relation to the old grimoires. And it was when humans learned to write, the demons, the spirits trembled. And it was that point at which we learned how to fix sounds, fix energy into something that we could then pass to each other, share with each other beyond the immediate moment. And we begin to pin down those energies in things that sort of solidify them, and then they begin to gather more power. So the written word has that amazing power of just being a charm in and of itself. And we forget that in our own native language. It's so easy to find that and be inspired when we're looking at runes or Ogham or Hebrew words in the Pentacles or wherever it is, like the words and language that is exotic to us. And obviously I list all of those examples as an English speaker, but we forget that that is true in our own language. And I find that it comes through most powerfully when we start to allow ourselves to explore the poetics of it, because the poetics of language is where we begin to really draw out those different layers and the vibrations and the energetics that conjure up the emotions and the spirit within us.
And so much of witchcraft and magical history was spoken word before anybody was able to write it down, or some of the things that were written down were destroyed. So I love that you include that vocal aspect of storytelling as well.
Oh yeah, see, that's something that in the moment, in a spell casting, in a ritual, our voices, the rhythm of them, the tone of them, the shape of the words in your mouth as you speak them, or on your hands if you use sign language, like those shapes, you are literally shaping energy. You are shaping the physical energy of the world. You're shaping the vibrational energy of the world around you, and you're sending that out. So there's a very, very visceral, powerful way in which those things have an impact. And as you say, it's so easy when you're starting out to think, oh, I've got to do this right. I've got to get all the correspondences correct. I've got to have all these tools. And we forget that that you come back to the breath and you breathe in energy and magic and inspiration. You breathe it in. We breathe it in every day, even if we don't realize. So we turn our awareness to it. We breathe it in. And then when we speak with that, our voice, our breath carries that magic and enchants the world. It enchants ourselves. It enchants the others that are listening.
Which maybe I should ask for your definition as well of the word bard, because I feel like maybe here in the States, we don't, maybe people's idea or interaction with that word has only ever been in reference to Shakespeare, when it really has such like a longer history. I just know it's not used as much here in the States. So maybe I could get your definition of a bard and your bardic skills, because you do consider yourself one.
Yeah, I mean, I will use the term bard for myself. It's not the first term that I present. Like as you saw, I said I'm an author, storyteller, and a witch. So those are kind of the core words that I feel like they sum up to other people where I'm coming from. But the bardic essence is that of being divinely inspired or attempting to be divinely inspired. It's that moment of listening to it, of opening up to it. And what I notice is that when people open up to it, it comes, because of course it does. Inspiration wants to flow in, and then sharing that in some way. The primary essence of bardic expression is in language, its voice and its words. But I actually expand that out to be any way in which we tell a story or express that inspiration, because we all have different ways of engaging with the world, of sharing that. So like my personal thing when I'm talking about bardic skills, I'm like, we're going to focus on the voice and on language, but all of these principles, you can apply them out creatively, because it's the way the inspiration comes through you. So the short definition of a bard, and the term comes from sort of the Celtic cultures and the Druidic spaces. But if you've read my book, you'll also see that I reference the Skald and the Norse tradition, poets, and I even do mention Shakespeare as someone who was inspired and then shared through language. So many bards are poets. In Wales, bards sort of refers quite specifically to a particular, historically refers specifically to a particular form of this. But nowadays we're a bit more loose with it. So a bard might write poetry, might sing songs, might tell stories, all of those sorts of things around that inspiration expressed through language. And I'm a member of OBOD, which is the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. Many people are. And the very first grade in that is the Bardic grade. And the reason for that is because the process of becoming a Druid involves beginning with opening to that divine inspiration and exploring how can you actually express that. Because the Druids, being the ritualists, being the historically the advisors, the guides, like community, holding community. Nowadays, it would be leading community ritual. In order to get to that point, you've got to be able to both listen to the inspiration and then share it in some form or another with your community in a way that is supportive.
Would you say then that your book would be ideal for witches of all skill levels? Like, is this something that if somebody's coming to it, like, I am thinking of this in terms of like public speaking and I hate that and I don't know if I'm any good at using my words, would this still be a ideal book for them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the reasons I wrote it was because when I tell stories, whether it's in a ritual context or not, so often people come up to me afterwards and they say, oh, I wish I could do that, but I'm not brave enough, or I can never remember a story. And every single one of them, I turn to them and I'm like, but I saw you telling a story earlier. I heard you telling a story. I've seen you telling stories, because at our core, human beings are storytelling animals. We are inspired by things and we then share those things. So that's where I would start with anyone that's like, oh, I'm not sure. It's like, you already tell stories. If you just think back over the last time you interacted with, say you went into a shop and bumped into a neighbor and they said, oh, how you doing? What have you been up to? And you started telling them, oh, well, actually, the other day I went for a walk and I saw a heron and it was really beautiful. Or whatever it is that comes to mind. Or, oh, well, I'm really struggling with this aspect because I'm not sleeping well and I'm having these dreams. And we start to tell stories about our lives just as a way of connecting. And they'll tell you a story as well. So you've already got those pieces where you tell stories. And we do it when we're writing social media updates. We're like, oh, I've just had this thing happen. We're telling stories then. So what I want to remind people is that that is already a skill that you have, but you don't need to use it in a big flamboyant way in order to tap into those skills for your magic. So the book itself, we start out with returning to the breath and to exploring words and language for how to find very, very simple ways of using our language as a spell. So where do you start if you want to do some really, really simple magic? Well, you start with deciding what it is and clarifying what it is that you actually want the result to be. What do you want the magic to do? And once you've clarified that, then you craft a sentence, you craft a phrase, and you might, if you're poetic, make it into something really pretty that rhymes, or you might just make it really simple and plain, a statement. And then I go through, well, how do you take that and turn that into a spell? By using your breath and your intention. So by the end of that very first chapter, you've already got all the skills you need to cast effective spells and enchantments on the world, and to begin to explore, how does my use of language, how do I use my words in those ways that are really, really simple. And then we go into, well, when we find stories, how do we explore those stories? And I talk even more in depth about this in Folktales, Fairies and Spirits, which was one of my previous books, on like, how do we explore those stories to find the instructions for how to do magic, how to build relationship with the spirits, how to be good witches or magicians or bards. So we're exploring those stories to give us keys and clues. So there's lots of different layers that you can engage as a storyteller, as someone who uses language, or as someone who enjoys language or enjoys stories.
I just have to say, I hope that the audio picks it up, but I can hear birds in the background and it makes everything that you say sound so much more magical. And I really hope in the podcast listeners, I hope that's coming across from you, because it's just like, I am eating up everything you say because the birds are telling me to.
Do you know, there's this beautiful thing. There's a phrase that comes up in some of the old grimoires and all the old stories that in reference, I've heard it recently in reference to King Solomon, who was like this big magician king, right? Really famous magician. And it said he knew the language of the birds. He spoke the language of the birds. And what that means is he spoke the language of the spirits. And when I heard that, I brought it right the way back to the tale of Rhiannon, who is a goddess, possibly a fairy queen. She's an otherworldly lady who moves between her world and our world and comes and marries a prince and helps him become king, and she brings lots of wisdom and what have you. So there's a whole in-depth tale, of course, in a Mabinogi about the Welsh goddess Rhiannon. She's a modern pagan goddess. And in the law, in the Welsh law, she is said to have the birds of Rhiannon can sing you to sleep or sing you awake. And so it's that music of the spirits heard through the bird song that can take you into trance, into the other world, and bring you back out of it. they're messengers that travel between. So I love that you can hear the birds. And, yeah.
It just makes me so happy. I'm like, oh, they're listening, they're chatting. I love it.
Most commonly, out of my window, I can hear seagulls, which are not as pretty as the prettiest sound as the ones. Yeah, they're quite insistent. But yeah, today we've just got some. I think there's sparrows out there.
Oh, that's so sweet. They're here for the recording. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing that I did want to touch on is that you also have the Enchanted Academy, and I don't know if the listeners are aware of that, even if they are aware of your books and are familiar with the Pagan Portal series, they might not know that you have established this community. So I would love to chat a little bit about that and have them know that that's a resource.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So I set up the Enchanted Academy as a community space that is off of all the social media platforms. So it's actually set up through a different platform so that you're not, because I don't know about you, but I find that when I go on the general social media platforms, I habitually just start scrolling, and I'm not doom scrolling, I'm not hope questing, I'm not like looking for anything in specific. I'm just sort of seeing the things that people have shared, and it puts me into this really passive space where it feels like my brain is melting and pouring out of my ears.
Yes.
And so I stop being able to engage and connect and share when I'm in that space. And I try and consciously discipline myself to go, no, I'm going to just go to these groups, or I'm going to comment on this. But the spaces aren't set up to facilitate that. And there are lots of conversations about the ethics of these platforms and about social media under capitalism and all of these things that are going on at the moment. So last July, I actually set up the Enchanted Academy to have a community space where people could come off of the social media and actually just engage with other people who were curious about magic, other people who were practicing magic. So there was a space for conversation. And almost every week, I used to do it as a live stream. Now I do it through Zoom, so there's a chance for after the recording, I record them all for people to come and have conversations. And I do different themed, basically either chats or magical workings. And I tend to make sure there's some practical magic in there. So each month there's a fairy circle where we go and do a ritual together and journey into fairyland, and then we share some of our fairy folklore from different lands, because we've got people from Brazil, people from America, from different parts of Europe. So there's that space for people to share their local fairy lore. And I do the Crimson Circles, which are all about embodied witchcraft and the magic of divine love and sacred sensuality and sexuality in sort of a broad sense, that I'll talk a bit about a topic and then like lead an energetic exercise or a guided meditation. So people are getting the opportunity to connect with different aspects of magic and experience those in healing ways and supportive ways within a community with other people. So I run those. There's something most weeks for free, and then the recordings stay up for a little while, and then I put them into the library, and you can join the library for about £20 a month and get all of the replays and access to various of my courses and things. And I've got other memberships for more in-depth courses that I run through the Enchanted Academy. And my ultimate goal, and I'm starting to work on this, so I'm mentioning this publicly for the first time, so here is an exclusive for you, is to actually have other teachers that are in that space. It's an academy. It's not just about me sharing my courses. It's a space where we can have people teaching different things and running their courses in a space, and then all of our different students and the people who are interested in magic, whether they're students or not, have that then community to share those different perspectives so that we can connect up, we can grow, we can develop things, we can experiment with things. And we're just experimenting with one of my colleagues has just sort of started coming in and going, okay, how would this work? how can we set up this space so that we can start to cross-pollinate and make a really supportive, interdisciplinary, magical community where everyone can learn from each other.
Oh, that's such a great space to offer. What a nice idea.
Thank you. So that's the Enchanted Academy, or tea for short, because tea is magic. You literally brew up something that either is a tasty treat, is always hydrating, or if it's caffeinated, that literally gives you energy. Like, tea is amazing. So that's why I called it the Enchanted Academy.
I love that. Double meaning. Because words are powerful.
Exactly.
Well, listeners, I will absolutely have that linked so you can head over. Great free resource for you, and then to check out any of the various memberships if you'd like. But before we wrap up, I would love to ask, I know we talked a lot about various different forms of magic and places to connect online, but do you have any other advice that you would like to offer to beginners starting out on their witchcraft journey?
So when people ask me this, I always reflect back on what was it that I needed to hear when I was starting out. And one of the biggest things that I really needed to hear was that, and this might sound contradictory, but on the one hand, it is really important to go and listen to lots of different people, and to actually listen to and to read books by different people, and to critically evaluate. So actually look at who those people are and why they are saying the things that they are saying, why they're writing the things they're writing, like what are their sources, what's their experience. Just because someone's good at marketing doesn't mean that they know their stuff on the magic, right? There are some amazing people that share some beautiful stuff that have actually only been doing it for a short time, so they're quite new on their journey themselves, and you can learn a lot from them, but just because they've gotten out there at this point doesn't mean they've got the depth of experience to be able to kind of guide through or share, oh, here are some of the pitfalls. So listen to lots of people, seek out the people that aren't necessarily in the big spotlight, seek out the different books from different places and different traditions and different sources, even if you think that maybe that's not for you. It's worth having a look at it and having a read of it so that you can see where these things feed into each other, and doing that so that you get like all the different bits of information, nice broad context to listen to and read widely. And then know that you yourself are a unique being. We are all individuals. We all have many, many similarities, right? But we all have our own way of engaging with the world, our own history, our own experiences, our own spirit relationships that come through our families, through where we live, through the work that we've done, even if we're not aware of it yet. There are all these possibilities that are unique to, the combination is unique to you. So when you're exploring all of these different, what different people say, just because one person says, I've been doing this for 50 years and it works perfectly and brilliantly every time, doesn't mean that it's going to work like that for you. And just because they say you should do it this way, doesn't mean that you should do it that way. And that's why if you read widely and listen to lots of people, not just people who write, not just people who teach, but listen to other people who are in your community, who have been doing it for many years and exploring these things, and listen to the stories that they tell, ask them questions, and notice what of what they say and what of what you encounter feels like it is a good fit for you. And once you start finding those things that feel like a good fit, and I don't mean easy, I mean feel like something that suit your particular, where you are. Once you start to find where those threads are, then follow those into those particular traditions and cultures and begin to explore within the context that those pieces come from. So, as an example, if you're encountering like lots of people talking about different goddesses, right? And loads of people find that the Morrigan is a really wonderful goddess to work with. She's very like powerful and present and what have you. And other people are there saying, oh no, actually, I don't work with her. She doesn't gel with me. But instead, I work with Ceridwen. So the Morrigan's Irish, Ceridwen's Welsh. They're both very, very different beings. And some people are really, really drawn to one. And they get really popular. And everyone's like, oh, everyone should be working with the Morrigan. But actually, maybe for you, she doesn't call to you. You can see how wonderful her work is for other people, but actually that's not your path. And you discover Ceridwen, the Welsh goddess, now a goddess of inspiration and initiation, the mother goddess who carries the cauldron that pours the Arwen into the world. And you discover her and you go, oh, actually, her story really resonates with me. Her image really resonates with me. And lots of people are saying I should go and work with the Morrigan, but actually, Ceridwen is calling. Well, follow that call and listen to other people that have worked with her, but then explore not just how she is presented in the modern spaces out of context, just as a separate being, just in a pagan, so as a pagan being, but look into her story, her culture in Wales. You might want to look at some of the language. You might want to go back to the tales that she first appears in, or the mentions of her in the legends, right? Go to the culture and to the context and begin to learn more about that, rather than taking her out of context. This is that balance. This is the nuanced piece. But put simply, read widely, listen widely, feel into what is right for you. And then once you are finding those threads, follow them deeply in. And even if things can be tricky, like learning Welsh is really tricky for me. So it's taking me many, many years to get even just tipping back a little bit in. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it isn't right. And that helps then build on everything.
That is really excellent advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, learning Welsh, wow, that's incredibly impressive. Good luck on that endeavor. I can only imagine.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Well, Halo, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all about your books and your community. I really appreciate you and the birds taking the time.
Yeah, thank you to the birds.
And listeners, I will have everything linked as always in the show notes and over at witchwednesdays.com, so you can find everything that we talked about today, joining the community, finding the books, and that is everything that I have for you this week. I will see you all next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast, and you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.